how many of you have rated a talk in the app? That's a low number of hands. We want everybody to be rating all of the sessions. We want to hear your feedback. So please, in between sessions or on the flight home or before you get out of here, please rate all of the sessions that you've seen today. Yesterday we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I am confident today with the ability for our next speakers to be able to adapt to any situation that gets thrown at them. That's because they are from a company called Adaptivist. So please help me welcome John Mort and Mark Gibson. And
Cheers.
All right, thanks, Ralph, and thanks for putting the curse on the demo. Right, so today we're gonna talk about tests. We're gonna introduce a tool that we use for testing, and with kind of some conversation with people, it's transformed the way that we do testing, and it's transformed the way that some of the other vendors are doing testing. But specifically, this is P2 only. This isn't cloud. So if you're expecting anything cloudy, then the door's over there. But having said that, some of the techniques we're going to introduce, you can actually use in cloud, and might be useful. So first off, why bother listening to Mark and I?
Oh, I know.
Go on, Mark.
Yeah, between us, me and John have got a combined development age of 19 years of Atlassian, which is actually about 3 years longer than Atlassian have even existed, isn't it? So we've been doing this for a while, and like all good software engineers, we like to test our software. And it's not trivial. You may have noticed to test Atlassian plugins, and we've learnt this through hard-won experience.
So every good test talk starts with a pyramid.
Not that kind.
No, or that one, or that one. So here's the sort of a testing pyramid. We kind of like to introduce to kind of set the scene.
Yeah, you've probably seen quite a lot of these over the last couple of days, but there's one thing that they all get wrong, and that's it's not actually a pyramid.
Okay. It's a triangle. Is that better, Mark?
It is better.
Yeah. All right. It's a triangle. All right. There we go. All right. So enough of that. Let's get on. Let's get on and have a look at some things in a bit more detail.
Unit tests are awesome.
Mark, that's what. I don't remember that slide.
What do you mean? We went through this last week. Do you not remember?
I was on holiday last week, Mark.
Yeah, but your mock wasn't. Although, to be honest, you were a bit quiet, but you kind of agreed with everything I said. So.
Well, I think, Mark, you've broken the most important rule here.
What rule would that be then, John?
Don't mock what you don't own. So, all right. So unit tests are really valuable thing, but with Atlassian plugin development P2, unit tests only take you so far. It's important to realize you don't own the API for Jira or Confluence or the things. And if you end up mocking out too much of it, your tests end up being pretty low value. So where you can unit test things, like absolutely do as much of it as possible. Things there, but don't lull yourself into a kind of a false sense of security with that. So that's the kind of unit testing in there.
Yeah, I mean, beyond unit testing, you've got integration testing, which is a bit of a fuzzy area as well. And traditionally, you've had to use HTML unit or Func test suite or poking REST endpoints. And this only gets you so far. You can't really test some of your services without these levels of indirection and without mocking. So there are particular edge cases and errors that you just can't catch through these tools.
So the next thing in our pyramid was acceptance tests. So these are typically kind of browser-driven, simulating real-world usage. And these are really useful, but they can take a really long time to run. like often many hours and kind of slow things down. So you need to make sure that these are minimal and as useful as possible in the way that you can run them as often as possible throughout your kind of release process.
And then there's manual testing. I don't think we need to say any more about manual testing.
Well, except just as a quick product pitch, Mark. We've got a tool.
Nah.
All right. So we have a tool for managing test cases and things, but that's enough of the product pitch.
Move on.
All right. So back to testing.
So what we need is like something in between unit testing, integration testing, something where we've got a mock, but we can write small tests in isolation. A kind of live unit test, kind of like unigration tests or integrate unit tests or something.
Yeah, so I think what you're looking for, Mark, is like the moon on a stick, really.
Yeah, that's about right.
As the thing. So back to our testing triangle. Where are we talking about? So here's our moon on a stick in that kind of fuzzy area between sort of the unit and integration testing. So this is where we're kind of the bulk of the rest of the talk is going to be going on. So first, a little bit of history. So we're going to go way back to 2012, and introduced in SDK 4.1 was wired tests. And wired tests kind of revolutionized the way that we could test things. We could run tests inside of the applications we were running with, and like initially this looked like this is our moon on a stick. This was the area we were able to test without mocks. So quick kind of run through wired tests. Actually, a quick show of hands. Who's used wired tests or knows wired tests? Okay, a few, not many. So what a wired test does is it builds all of your tests into a plugin, which you can then deploy into the application you want to test with. They can be spring wired using the Atlassian plugin XML, and then your results are kind of given back to you by JUnit. And they're a really brilliant concept. It's a great idea, and it means we can say goodbye to our mocks.
Yeah, but there are a few downsides. You have to continually rebuild with Atlas CLI. It's very difficult to actually control what goes into the plugin. Pretty much everything in test scope goes in, and we've had cases where we've had to like have several Maven modules just so we can have different tests using wide tests, different test cases.
But they are an excellent. They are useful, and we can say goodbye to our mocks, Mark.
Yeah, but there's also the problem you can't run a single test. You run the test, it runs the entire test suite in the background, and then reports one result back to you. So if one of the tests catastrophically fails that you've not actually run, you don't really know about it. And then, of course, Spring Scanner came along, and it wasn't kept up to date for that, and it just seems like wide tests, isn't receiving any love.
But yeah, it is a good idea, though.
Yeah, but it's a bit inflexible. It can be somewhat painful, but despite all that, we continued with wide tests for a few years, as it was still better than doing mocks of things we didn't own.
Yeah. So we're back to our history lesson story. So 2005, we kind of experienced the Great Enlightenment. I was looking for a talk to go to at DevOps in Belgium, and there wasn't really anything catching my attention apart from this talk with a really silly name, which was Arquillian. What I didn't know back then was that this silly name was going to really kind of transform the way that we did testing. So we learnt about it in the day, and then over a beer in the evening, we actually managed to run our first Arquillian test inside of Jira over that.
Tell us more, John.
Well, I will do. So Arquillian is an open source project from JBoss, and what it allows you to do is to run tests inside of a container. Now, the definition of a container is really broad. So a container is something you can run code in, whether that's an application server like Glassfish or Tomcat, or it could be Docker. Docker works as an Arquillian container in here. One of the really important things about it is really extensible. And what we were able to do was to extend the framework to have Atlassian applications as a container target. So we were able to run tests inside of Jira, Confluence, Bucket, Fisheye, and even the Ref app. It still works. You can run run tests.
Fisheye. You said Fisheye, didn't you?
Fisheye.
Fisheye.
Yeah.
I bet that doesn't get mentioned, but
Yeah. We wondered if this was going to be the only talk that mentions Fisheye. All right, so let's have a look at this in action, because yeah, you can see actually what it's actually doing. So over to you, Mark.
Yeah, so we've got a test class here with 3 tests in it. Oh, it's playing. So we've got 1, 2, 3 tests down there, and there's some things being imported up at the top there, and we're going to run the test. This is all in real time, well, recorded in real time. So, come on. Is it going to work? No! What are the chances of that on a pre-recorded demo? So, we can go in now, fix the test. There we go. Run the failed test cases. Notice we've not had to run Maven here or anything else. Still a failure. Let's go and fix that one. Run it again, and come on, you can do it. There we go. Tests all ran inside Jira. We'll run the whole test class just for the hell of it, and we'll see it, all of them pass. Remember, this is actually running these tests inside the container, inside Jira. There we go. And that demonstrates how fast this development cycle is. You can edit your test, run your tests in your IDE, run it from the IDE. Don't need to run any Maven commands. Just press play. Job done.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds great. But how's it work?
Well, I'm glad you asked, John. It's actually very similar, in fact, to the way the wide test frameworks run. We build the tests into the plugin, and they're deployed into Jira. They're spring wired with support spring scanner, and then all the results are delivered back. The tests run within Jira, and the results are delivered back by JUnit. So whatever you normally use for collating your results from tests, they just look like normal JUnit tests from the outside.
So this works the same in like integration tests as well as from your IDE.
Yeah. But there are some slight differences which give Arqullian the edge. And we'll go over to them.
Hang on.
Who's controlling this?
You are. I'll stop.
You have to explicitly declare within the test class what's going to go into the plugin with Arquillian, whereas wide test, absolutely everything that's in your test scope, including your Jira API, gets put into the plugin, and you end up with this enormous plugin that gets installed into Jira, whereas Arquillian has exactly what you've told it to contain. The wide tests are built as part of the Maven build prior to running the tests. I can't tell you the amount of times I sat there fixing tests, running the tests, wondering why my test didn't pass, and I just forgot to rerun the Maven command to install my test plugin. But that doesn't happen with Arquillian. You press run, it does everything there and then. It's built, installed, and run. And yeah, with Arquillian, yeah, as I just said, the test is just run there, and wide test, you have to deploy it prior. And because we have this kind of build time, just in time build deploy at runtime, that means the test class is in its own plugin, and it's very specific, tailored to the specific needs of that class. It has only the dependencies you need for that particular test class, as opposed to the big fat plugin that contains absolutely all of your test code and wide tests. And this is what gives us our fast dev cycle that you saw in the demo. You saw we were able to run the 4 tests in the space of like a minute directly from the IDE, and the wide tests aren't that fast.
All right, Mark. So that's kind of good overview of the things. But actually, how do we actually get started using this? Show me the code.
Well, I'm glad you asked, John. I have some slides prepared. First, you need to add some dependencies into your configuration for your favorite build tool. And here we've got Maven, because, you know, who doesn't love Maven, eh?
I hate Maven.
So the first dependency is Arqullian itself, the integration with Arqullian and JUnit. And then there's this remote Atlas container, which is the component that we've written, the extension to Arqullian that makes it work with Atlassian products. You need a very simple configuration file that tells Arqullian to use our extension and to target Jira. There's a little bit more to it, like you have to put in loads of XML namespace cruft, but I've left that out for the sake of sanity.
So with that, you could actually target something other than the Jira that runs it with the Atlassian SDK.
Yes, sorry. There's additional configurations you can put in there, like port, address, and that kind of thing. By default, it'll hit localhost on the SDK port, so 2990 for Jira, but you can customize that. The next thing you need to do is add the Arqullian runner to your test class. Or you can use JUnit rules instead. You can use a class rule and a rule. You need those two, and that'll support Arqullian then. That means you can then use a different class, different runner like Cucumber or something like that. And, well, add some tests. And then this is you can add then. I mean, this is where all the magic is, where you can import the services. This is like standard Spring and JavaX and Spring Scanner annotations. So you just import your services like issue service, project services, any of the Jira APIs, any of your plugin APIs, any third-party plugin APIs that are exported via OSGI. Oh, also you can inject into method parameters as well. So if you only need a service or a component for a specific test method, you can inject it just into that method. I've not got an example of that. And then there are test dependencies. So if you need to add anything else in, like if you want to include assert J, something like that, you can add this static method in, which will add in everything that's under this package. There's also a resolver you can use to include an entire Maven artifact and all of its transitive dependencies if you really want to, but it's very rare you need to do that. You can generally get away with just including a package and what it contains.
Right, so let's revisit our demo again and kind of walk through things with everything we've just learned, so we can explain kind of what's going on.
Hit run.
Yeah, so hit run.
Before we haven't got any slides for this part of the talk, so we're just running this to fill it in. Before the test actually runs, Arqullian takes over, and it reads its configuration and delegates control to our extension.
So what does our extension do, Mark?
Well, it creates an archive using a library called Shrink-Wrap, which is part of the Arquillian ecosystem. If you think of an archive as a virtual file system, it's specifically designed for building jars, wars, ears, zips, even tars, anything archivey, as the name suggests.
All right. So what goes into this archive?
Well, the test class itself, and then there's some Arquillian gubbins, including a servlet and all the bits that make Arquillian work. And it sticks in there an Atlassian plugin XML file and all the other stuff you'd expect in an Atlassian plugin, and any of those dependencies that we included. And in this case, in this test class, we're including this test helper service, which we use to set up our fixtures for our test. And that's just, yeah, that's something you can do. You just split out the test. So that doesn't have to exist inside Jira. That can be something that's just part of your test suite. And you split it all out. And that can also, that's just a component, so that can inject all the services it needs. So you can remove all of this cruft of setting things up out of your actual test suite and delegate it to another service that you inject.
So this archive is actually just a plugin, right? An OSGI bundle.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. All right. So what happens after we've got our archive?
Well, it's then it's what would you say? Spring scanned, and then passed through the BND lib, and it produces a completely transformerless Atlassian OSGI bundle of a plugin.
Yeah. So what happens then?
And then our extension takes the this whole plugin that we've got fully formed and uploads it via either quick reload if it's available or the UPM.
Yeah. And then?
And then and then the tests actually run and Arquillian itself kicks in. And what that does is it'll run, as your tests run on the test JVM, Arquillian will proxy it through the servlet that we've installed via our plugin to the actual test method that's inside the container. That will actually run for real inside the test and send its results back by the result of the response of the servlet to Arquillian, which will then make it look like that method has just performed something.
Right.
Locally.
So let me get this right. So the tests run inside of the product JVM, like in Jira or whatever, and their results are delivered back to the JVM running JUnit.
Well done, you passed the test.
All right. So anything else?
Yeah, actually, there's more.
Oh.
Once the test is finished, it then uninstalls the plugin, and it's like we were never there. Well, providing you've cleaned up after yourself in your test.
So this process happens every time we run a test?
Yeah, every time in that demo, that happened 4 times. From clicking that button to that thing spinning, all of that happened pretty fast.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool. All right, so that's kind of the overview of what it kind of allows, and hope you've given you a kind of a taster for what Arquillian can do, and how it can kind of improve sort of your testing, particularly around that kind of grey area between unit and integration tests, and actually kind of give you a lot more, get a lot more faith in the testing that you're doing. But there's a whole load of things else that you can use Arquillian for. So there's a bunch of projects along with the Arquillian ecosystem. 2 of them is Arquillian Drone and Graphene, and these allow you to run like WebDriver tests with Arquillian, and they're kind of very thin wrapper around the WebDriver APIs, but it's nicer weighting and those kinds of things.
Yeah, Arquillian. One of the main parts of Arquillian is it has its own kind of injection framework in there as well. So all of the extra bits of the ecosystem kind of can inject data straight into your test. So if you're using something like Drone sets up your Selenium WebDriver for you, and it's already there, and you already know what port everything's on, and that it's all from the configuration. You don't have to kind of go off and find that yourself or have it hard-coded or whatever you'd normally have to do with some magic. There's also Docker support. There's a project called Arquillian Cube, which can be used to manage Docker containers. And this runs like, it's very similar. It can be used without it can be used standalone without the Arquillian that we've just shown you, and it can be used to set up containers as you run the test, or it can be used at various stages through the test cycle. You can do things with Docker, basically. So before your test suite runs, it can set up a load of containers, and then it can sit and wait, and you can tell it when it's ready, when it's time to run your test. So it can wait for ports to be available or messages to appear in logs, or you can create your own things to perform any other custom kind of waiting that needs to be done.
Yeah, so one thing that's possible to do here is actually to stand up a data center cluster and then scale it out as part of your different tests. So you can do testing against real life things, against databases and things.
Yeah, and if you're using this cube with Arquillian itself and all the injection stuff that Arquillian provides, it will provide all the details of these containers to your test. So again, you don't need to find them out from anywhere else. Your test can know what ports to run on, what addresses everything's on, and it's just all there already in your test case for you.
So another thing you can do is install other plugins as part of your test. So if you've got things you integrate with or depend on, you can install them, and you can test whether your kind of behavior with them installed and without them installed, which is not something that's really that easy to do with anything else.
So there's another thing. This is not just about running tests inside a container either. You can run the entire test class on the client side. And you go, well, you can do that anyway. What's the point in that? Well, you get all the injection methods as well. So you get all of the extra features and all the extension points that Arquillian provides. But you can also run some of your methods on the client side and some of your methods in the container. So one thing you can do if you want to test a REST API is that you can have an in-container test that sets up the internal state of Jira. Then you can have another test. You can sequence the test. I know that's probably frowned upon, but it's pragmatic. So you can sequence your tests, and you have your next test run client-side and poke your REST API to make sure that you're getting that data back. So you don't need to have to do this kind of like one REST call to set the data, one REST call to set it back. You can properly unit test your REST interface, and like if you want to submit something to your REST by your REST API, you can then validate it by the internal service rather than having to do another get back or whatever. And you can do the same with UI testing as well with browsers. So you can set up your state, poke it with Selenium, and then check that the internal state is changed or is what you expect it to be without having to run another potentially flaky Selenium test.
Yeah, it also helps with the speed of running those kind of UI-driven acceptance tests, because you don't have to set up the state of the application via browser. You can set it all up and then just check the one thing that really matters to you via the browser. And another thing you can do is you can test on multiple products. So think about something like setting up a Jira and a Confluence with app links together, and you install it. You can install different tests on. You can install the tests on the two different things and see how they integrate. So you can do that, or you can so you stand up a data center cluster, and you should also be able to like target one node in a cluster and see what happens if you do things in different nodes.
Yeah, like we did with the client-side testing. One method could be a test, or one method could poke Jira and do something in Jira. The other one could poke at the next test and then do something in Confluence. And if you've got some kind of link between the two that does some magic between the two, you can test that happens. Or if you probably I don't do data center, but if you do data center, you could probably put something into Jira on one node and then check it on the other node via another test.
Yeah, and so when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So there's a whole load of other things that you can do with using Arquillian.
So you can, one of the other things we use it for is bootstrapping. So we often, rather than like setting up a manual, setting up a Jira and then adding in projects, adding issues and all of that stuff manually, you can just create like some tests that do all of that for you. So you fire up your Jira, you run this test suite, and it's ready for you to do your exploration work and test against, develop against, and that. And you can even use those bootstraps then as the initial test class of your test suite, so that it can do a load of initialization, and then all the rest of your tests can work against that.
So you can also use the test in this way as kind of like a way to explore APIs, like kind of a scratch area or a REPL to kind of just give the product a poke, see how it is, how it behaves, because the feedback cycles are like fast enough. You can see, well, what happens if I call this on this service? Things is kind of useful.
Yeah, and we've even used it for automation as well. So you can just write these scripts that do the browser tests and various things like that, run them in a Bamboo plan. It can scrape data from websites using the Graphene services. There's a whole host of things you can do.
Yeah. So we hope we kind of spark some interest in the tool, which we think it's really great. And so I'd like to kind of encourage you to go and explore to use it. Come and talk to us afterwards. We've got an example repository, and we're going to put some links in a minute that you can kind of check out to see how you can sort of integrate it pretty easily. And there's a number of people are using it to do testing in their add-ons, and we'd like it to be a kind of a replacement for wired tests as something a bit more kind of extensible and flexible going forward.
Yeah, Arquillian itself is under a APL2 license, and so is our extension to it, and we accept PRs if anybody wants to dive in and help.
Yeah, and issues, please report.
Yeah,
report things.
please tell us if you're using it as well, because we've found a few people are using it and we didn't know. So far we've got 2 users that we're aware of. So if anyone else is using it secretly, please come and tell us. We'd like to know.
So, thanks. Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we got about 7 minutes. What questions you guys have for John and Mark?
First of all, I would thank you for this talk. It sounds very interesting. What I would like to know is if it's possible to get code coverage with these tests.
Yes, there are extensions for Jacoco for coverage, things that, and you can just attach the code coverage tools to the JVM of the product and kind of merge it in from like that. Yeah, that works. We've done that with integration tests and acceptance tests.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, John. Just an extra extension to that. So I've been trying to use code coverage output, but I can generate it, but I can't publish it. Have you been able to publish it to somewhere like Sonar?
Yes. It's a little bit fiddly. You have to kind of merge, because you potentially have coverage on like in 2 places. You have to kind of merge them together, but we've managed it, haven't we?
Yeah, there is some. It's been ages since I've looked at that, but it is possible. Post as an issue, and I'll dig out
an example POM. That would be awesome.
I'll dig out the code.
You've shown the process of changing your tests and then rerunning it. What happens if I need to change my app code? Basically, what's the process there? Do I need to reinstall the app that I'm developing?
So well, there are 2 options here. It depends how you install the app in the first place. If you've had it installed via the SDK and you're using Quick Reload, then it will just work with Quick Reload like that. The other thing you can do, if you want it, you can have the test case itself actually install your plugin for you before as it runs. So there are a load of extra annotations. The thing with Arquillian is all about the annotations. And there's ones for deployments. And as we said earlier, you can deploy P2 plugins. So you can deploy any number of P2 plugins prior to the test running. So you've got the two options there. Either.
Yeah, because you can actually start up the applications without your plugin installed, and then run some tests that go and install it. So potentially testing upgrade tasks and those kinds of things.
So does Arquillian does it start Jira or Conference for you, or do you already have to have that running somewhere else?
Thanks, John. You have to have it already running. It doesn't do that for you. Arquillian itself, for the other types of containers, for like Tomcat and Glassfish and those kind of things, it does start up. It can be used to start up the containers, but you don't really want it to be starting up Jira before you run every test because it takes forever to start up Jira. So you want to have it running already. But you can use Cube, Arquillian Cube, to set up all your Docker goodness, if you want to do it that way.
Anybody else? All right, we got a taker.
Thank you. Just a little addition to this, what was working for me was to use it the way you described it, and it more or less just replaced the wire test in a normal test cycle. So if you make a Maven verify the test, just Jira started up and it was working. So I don't know if this was coincidence or if this was expected, but it worked for me.
Yeah, it's very easy to migrate from white tests. It's just a case of like changing the test runner and adding the Spring scanner annotations and getting rid of your test plugin XML and adding in your dependency. All right, there's a few things you have to do, but it is pretty easy. We've converted absolutely hundreds of tests. I don't think we have a single white test anymore. We just got all of these instead.
Time for one more question. And there.
Is it easy to integrate Arquillian tests in the Maven lifecycle?
In the Maven lifecycle?
Yes.
It doesn't really interact with Maven though, because it all runs from JUnit. It's just a test runner. So everything it does is from the point at which the test runs. Yeah. So you don't need Maven or Gradle or anything.
No, but it runs as part. You can have them run in the same way that wired test will run as part of the integration test phase using the failsafe runner. They run at that point at that time. So when you run the integration test with the SDK, it will start up the application and then run your tests and then shut it down again at the end. So the SDK does that bit, and then your tests run kind of where you'd expect the integration test to run. So it works as you'd expect it to.
Oh, there's one little thing actually that we haven't got in the documentation for this. Is if you do actually attempt to use this and you use IntelliJ IDEA, IntelliJ IDEA has Arquillian support built into it. You need to switch that off, otherwise it won't work.
All right, guys, let's give them another round of applause. And again, another reminder for the app, and please give us feedback on this talk and every other talk that you've given, or you've seen. So thank you.